Hey, so most people have a retirement plan that feels fine until you ask it one question: what would break it? And that's what a stress test is. It's not a spreadsheet, it's not a Monte Carlo simulation. A stress test is simply finding the fragility before life finds it for you. And if you're over 40, okay, stress testing matters because, well, sorry to say it, but time compresses. When you're 25, you could be wrong for a while and still recover. And when you're 45 or 55, being wrong at the wrong time can lock in damage. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to stress test your plan without spreadsheets, right? And this is not homework, it's not a checklist, it's just really a way of thinking. Because the goal isn't certainty. The goal is durability, flat out. Okay, so there's a couple concepts here. The first one being a plan isn't real until it survives stress. So let's define that. A retirement projection answers, hey, what happens if things go normally, if things go smoothly? And a retirement plan answers, well, the opposite. What happens if it doesn't? And what people believe is I'm invested for the long term, so I'm fine. But how it really shows up in plans is they track bounces, they track average returns, they track whether the line is going up. Simple as that. But they rarely ever ask, what if when I retire, the first few years are ugly? What if my income changes? What if inflation sticks around longer than it should? It's because spreadsheets, they feel like control. They give you a clean story. And why it breaks down is because retirement outcomes aren't decided by the clean story, right? They're decided by stress scenarios, the ones that maybe you didn't prepare for. And that's why stress testing is the skill. So the stress test framework, there's really three buckets that, well, we need to be aware of. And a strong stress test is a timing stress, an income stress, and a cost of life stress. Very simple. And if your plan can survive those three, then you're usually in a durable zone, which is fantastic. But if it can't, and it doesn't mean that you're doomed, it just means that, hey, you found a weak point. So let's teach each bucket so you can expand on it mentally. So the bucket one is the timing stress, and this includes bad timing, bad sequence of returns. And the timing stress is, hey, what if the market is ugly right when I need my money? Okay. This is sequence risk without the jargon. What people believe is that markets come back eventually. How it shows up is they assume recovery solves everything. They assume the order of the returns doesn't matter. And that's why it feels reasonable. Okay. Because earlier in life, it mostly didn't matter. If you're not withdrawing, a downturn is just a paper event, right? But why it breaks down later on in life is because the moment you become dependent on your assets, the order of returns becomes decisive. So losses early plus withdrawals can create permanent damage. And here's the timing stress test question. If the first 2 years, 3 years of retirement are ugly, do I have to sell my assets to fund my life? And if the answer is yes, then your plan is a lot more fragile than you think. Again, not because you're wrong, but because you're exposed. And the point isn't panic. The point here is clarity. Bucket number two, income stress. Otherwise, what if my work income changes? So what if my income drops or stops before I planned? Okay. This is the forced retirement problems without the drama. What people believe is, worry, man, I can always work longer. And they treat work income as the guaranteed future flexibility. They plan to make up for it later. And again, the reason why that feels reasonable is because right now you can work. So your brain assumes you always can. But why this breaks down later on in life is because work becomes a variable, not a guarantee. There are factors like health, caregiving, layoffs, burnout, industry shifts, things that show up later more often later. And so here's the income stress test question. If my income dropped for 12 to 24 months, does my plan bend or does it snaps? And if it snaps, you've discovered a weak joint. Again, not a moral failure, just a design insight. Bucket number 3, cost of life. So the question is, what if my life costs more than my plan assumes? So this includes inflation, yes, but it also includes reality, healthcare, family, housing, obligation. What people typically believe is, hey, I'll just spend less in retirement. Yeah, I mean, how it typically shows up is that they understate their lifestyle costs. They plan on becoming a different person later. And to a certain degree, I get why it seems reasonable to think that way, because during your working years, income covers any estimation errors. You could tighten up when needed. But when it happens later on in life, spending is less flexible than people think. And the closer you get, the more dangerous it is to rely on hope-based spending cuts. So here's the self-reflecting question, okay? The question becomes, if my cost of living is 20% higher than I expected, do I have a buffer or do I now have a problem? That one question reveals whether your plan has slack or is really just running at the edge. So, hey, this is the no spreadsheet summary test. If you only do one thing, do this. Ask yourself these 3 questions out loud when it comes to timing. If my first 2-3 years after retirement are ugly in terms of markets, do I have to sell low to live? Income. If income drops for 12 to 24 months, does my plan bend or does it snap? And third, the cost. If life costs 20% more, do I have a buffer or do I simply just have hope? If those questions created tension, that tension is information, not fear. It means your uncertainty is pointing to structure. The real goal is really just to find out what the weak point is. So let's make this practical without turning into a to-do list. A stress test isn't meant to make you anxious. It's really meant to answer one question. Where is my plan fragile? Because, well, once you know the weak joint, you stop flailing, you stop guessing, you start to use your critical thinking abilities like an adult and ask, hey, what do I need to change so this doesn't break? And that's the point of the channel. No tips, no hacks, just clear thinking under real constraints. What most people get wrong about stress testing is this. The most common ones I've seen anyways is that they stress test returns, but they don't stress test life, right? They ask, okay, well, what if the market returned 6% instead of 8%, right? But they don't ask, what if my health changes? What if my parents need help? What if my job changes? What if inflation just stays annoying, like forever? Because real retirement risk is rarely just one variable. It's multiple variables at once. And that's why the 3 buckets matter. It really does force you to see the real world. So in the next video, I'm going to do a case study because case studies make this real. The person will have high income, but probably still not on track. Not because the person is irresponsible, but because the plan is fragile in a specific way. So if you're over 40 and retirement still feels unclear, don't default to self-blame. Default to stress testing. Not with spreadsheets, but with the right questions. Timing stress, income stress, cost of life stress. Because a plan isn't real until it survives stress. I'll see you on the next one.